Let's unpack all of this now with Mariana Budjeryn. She's a senior research associate with the Project on Managing the Atom at the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center, and she joins us now live from Boston. Thank you so much for being with us on the program today. Now, there are serious
Thanks for
concerns
having me.
around the fighting that's happening in Zaporizhzhia around the nuclear plant. What are the chances that we'll be dealing with a nuclear disaster if warnings from the IAEA aren't taken seriously?
Well, the situation is very serious and it is extremely concerning. What we're witnessing here is really an unprecedented state of affairs where a large civilian nuclear facility, the site of six nuclear reactors and a large number of spent nuclear fuel. So that's a lot of very active fissile material is being trapped in the middle of a war zone. So even though nuclear facilities are designed with very stringent safety and security procedures and systems in mind, none of these systems and procedures have been designed for this kinds of scenario. So part of the answer is we really don't know what might happen. Some of the systems that are in place, for instance, the containment chambers that cover the reactor cores, they give us some confidence that the reactor core might be protected from some of the damage or some of the shelling. These are very robust structures that are designed to withstand some level of impact, but we don't know how they would withhold against a sustained shelling or a rocket fire, for instance, that might hit into a more vulnerable part of that facility. And
Mhm.
another, even still more vulnerable part of the safety and security of a nuclear power plant are the cooling systems that are supposed to keep that reactor at a certain temperature to keep moderate the nuclear reaction that is going on and in the reactor core, and also that are there to cool the spent
Right.
fuel pools. So if those systems are damaged, we really could face a very
Mhm.
serious accident where there's a meltdown, there might be fires in spent fuel pools, and there might be a release of radioactive materials, radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere.
We're aware that Ukrainian engineers are still currently operating the nuclear plant in Zaporizhzhia, but if standard work there is interrupted, what happens next?
Well, these people indeed are working under duress. There have been recent reports just today. I was reading, some messages from the local personnel that they're basically working under guns of these Russian occupying force. And this is a very highly trained personnel. It's very difficult to replace them. They're nuclear engineers, operators of a nuclear power plant, and their job is to very dutifully and very rigorously follow these safety protocols. You can imagine that that's very difficult to do if you're basically being held hostage and have to explain your every move to a military administration that knows very little about the safe operation of a nuclear facility like that. We have heard the reports of people working very long shifts, not being able to get the rest that they're supposed to get.
Mhm.
Their families are pretty much all in the satellite town of Enerhodar. That is also a town that's being occupied. There have been reports there are people being detained and,
Mhm.
taken away without any trace. So you can imagine operating such a facility and
Right.
constantly worrying about the well-being of your family
Mhm.
it's an extremely dangerous situation. I cannot stress enough just how unprecedented and
Right.
how reckless and criminal what's going on really is.
Mariana, if you can, just give us some insight into what would happen and how neighboring countries and the region overall would be affected if we do indeed witness a nuclear disaster.
Well, if there is a failure of a cooling system, for instance, that operates in a reactor core, there are backup systems, right? There are diesel powered generators that would kick in, but those are just emergency systems. They will last only a certain time, and if they run out of diesel fuel, for instance, then basically we're looking at the possibility, the risk of the meltdown the reactor core. That could lead to fires, that could lead even to an explosion, that could tear through this containment chamber. And then once the radioactive particles are released into the atmosphere, and the specifics of a nuclear generating reactor like this, nuclear power generating reactor, is that it is rather efficient, it's rather good at producing a lot of very nasty byproducts of that reaction. So those particles will be released into the atmosphere.
Right.
There, they will be picked up by the prevailing winds that could blow, any way that they blow. And then with precipitation, those particles will come down as fallout and threaten contaminating the soil and the water of whatever countries they're in. And the preview of that happening was, of course, Chernobyl.
Right.
There, the winds blew north and west as far out as Great Britain. There has been a fallout of cesium-137,
Right.
which is a radioactive isotope. There are some sheep farms in the UK whose produce had to be tested still into early 2000s,
Right.
2 decades after the accident, for these radioactive materials. And and they have a very long lives,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right. There's a great risk being posed here during these attacks between Russia and Ukraine. All right, Mariana Budjeryn, thank you so much for joining us here on the NewsHour. It was a pleasure speaking to you.